All right, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Women of Flexo Lunch and Learn with the Women of Flexo. I am Jenny Scott from Berry Global, and with my co-chair, Dr. Nona Woolbright. We are happy to have you guys on the call with us today. Usually like to start off these lunch and learns with a quote, and I thought this quote was appropriate for today as well. All progress takes place outside of your comfort zone. So keep that in mind as you listen to the roundtable today. The agenda for today will be a little background about the Women of Flexo. We'll be introducing Brad Pareso, who is going to be our moderator for today, and he will be introducing the speakers, and they will be answering the questions during the presentation. And then at the end, we'll have a group discussion and Q&A. So about the Women of Flexo, our mission and vision is comprised of industry members who work to support and promote women in the flexographic industry through a variety of opportunities. And you can visit the womenofflexo.org to learn more about what our group does. So our group also has four leadership teams. The first one is Leadership Diversity, where they work towards increasing female representation on panels, speaking opportunities, and industry leadership roles. The Recruitment Group coordinates with schools and finds members to network. Marketing and Strategy increases awareness of our group in defining its long and short-term goals. And Mentorship Group develops relationships between members new to the industry and those with experience. So next I'd like to introduce Brad Pareso. He's the Vice President of the FTA. He joined the organization in 2013 as Managing Editor of the Flexo magazine, and also held the position of Director of Content and Digital Strategy. Brad has degrees in journalism and economics from Pennsylvania State University. He has received Tabby Awards for writing and editing, and twice performed at Carnegie Hall as part of the New York City-wide orchestra. Brad lives in Stamford, Connecticut with his wife and his dog. Brad, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jenny. And thanks to the Women of Flexo for the privilege of moderating today's roundtable. The participants in today's discussion are going to have some personal insight into questions that I know I've had, and I'm sure everybody that's listening has also had. And as you listen to those answers, you're going to hear a lot of first-person phrasing, things like "in my experience" or "from what I've seen." And it's important to point that out because the questions that we're going to discuss, there are no hard and fast answers. And what the speakers are going to discuss today are not edicts on how to approach these things. It's really informed by their opinions and the ways that they've encountered and overcome these questions. So just something to keep in mind as we go through today. So our first question for Alyssa Denny, and I'll go ahead and read the question and I'll introduce her. How do I ask for more training without sounding like I can't do the job? And Alyssa graduated from University of Wisconsin-Stout and then spent her first 7 years in project management and sales development for corrugated point-of-purchase displays. She's now an account executive at Graphic Packaging International, selling paperboard cartons, and also an adjunct teacher at UW-Stout for its graphic communication program. In 2016, she was the youngest and the first female to join the sales team at her facility. Alyssa, please.
All right, thanks, Brad. When I saw the questions submitted, these were two that I chose because I could certainly relate to them. When it comes to sounding, being afraid that you might sound like you can't do your job, or you want people to see the value that you bring, or you maybe have some skills that are underutilized. What I realized is that I could never tell somebody the value that I bring to the team. I could never convince somebody else because either it felt maybe self-indulgent to talk about myself that way, and I don't want to try to convince somebody to like me and to see what skills I have. But what I could do is I could keep showing up to my job each day and be organized be prepared, show them what skills I do have, and create a dependence from my peer group to see what I can contribute by just doing what I'm good at, as opposed to trying to convince anybody to see the value in me. And when it comes to skills then that you're interested in growing, maybe, what I found is the best way is to tell my supervisor, I'd really like to help with that project. I have an interest in that project, and offer your time to fill gaps, because as supervisors, I've found as a supervisor that there's times I wish somebody would be willing to help, or somebody be willing to step into a place, because we are looking to delegate often. And when I would say, I don't quite know how, but I'm happy to do it, then that initiative would kind of spark the opportunities for me to go get the training that would be appropriate to be able to contribute in that way. And my value then would grow for the team. When it comes to the second question, feeling like as the youngest member, although I know I'm valued, how do I get people to realize that I can bring more? And whether that's after those new skills have been created from training that, maybe you've made your point, they've helped you develop. How do I get senior people to realize what more I can bring to the team? And feeling frustrated or underutilized, that maybe that your supervisor doesn't see that in you yet. Also, having led a group of about 7 or 8 people on my team in the past, I found that it became my job as the supervisor to communicate what I did appreciate about each individual, so that I could focus on those 8 people and help each of them develop. But we all can have some empathy both ways, that our supervisors, while they want us to succeed, they maybe don't know where we're struggling unless you speak up. And when it comes to encouraging or trying to further validate whether or not they appreciate you, I think one good resource that I found was similar to, it's the book by Gary Chapman. He wrote a book originally called The 5 Love Languages. And I found that he had a book similar, The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. And so being that it's a two-way street with your supervisor about whether or not you feel valued or underutilized or frustrated, and if they're giving you enough gratification, thinking about what does gratification actually look like to you when you receive it. What types of things make me feel appreciated? Is that because they've complimented me, or they've shown me maybe by giving me different rewards? And then what does it look like when you are delivering appreciation to other people? What does that maybe look like for your boss to deliver appreciation to you? Realizing that we all speak in different languages is the point. So maybe first defining whether or not, are you really underutilized? Are you really underappreciated? Or perhaps is their language of telling you so different from your language of receiving it? Because all good supervisors definitely want to set a positive culture, but maybe double checking to see, is that exchange of appreciation in the same language?
Thank you, Alyssa. Thanks. That's great. And just a quick reminder to anybody attending, we are having an open Q&A at the end. If you have any questions to follow up with anything Alyssa mentioned or that any of our speakers are going to bring up, please feel free to use the Q&A functionality in your Zoom doc, and we'll hold them until the end of the webinar. So up next, we have a question for Katie Tuckwiller. My manager and I have a good working relationship, but sometimes her boss asks me to work on projects that take time away from my regular work and make it difficult to meet goals that my manager has given me. How do I deal with this? And Katie works for DuPont Cyrell in an application R&D role. She's a graduate of Clemson University and has been in the flexographic field for more than 20 years. Katie, take it away.
Before I start, Brad, I can't start my video. So, thank you.
No, there we go.
Thank you. Like Brad said, I've been in the industry for about 20 years, a little bit more. I've had quite a few managers. I've had quite a few managers with managers, and everybody has work that they want you to do within a certain time frame. So with this question, it's good that you have a good working relationship with your manager. And what I would recommend is, if you don't already do this, have a quarterly meeting with your manager to review the work goals that you have from her. And you need to make sure that you talk about the completion or milestone dates for each of those goals, along with what the priority level is, because some work isn't as important as others. Also, that your priorities will change throughout the year. So it's good to know when you need to pivot in your work. So this puts you and your manager on the same page. And I do this with my manager. We're on the same page as to the projects that I'm actively working on. And that gives you an idea of how much time you have available if and when her manager asks you to do some work. If looking at that, you don't have enough time, the thing to do is to go to your manager and say, this has happened. Your manager has asked me to do this work. It's going to take this amount of time. What would you like me to shift for my priorities? And at this time, your manager may or may not know that her manager has asked you to do some extra work. And it's always good to keep your manager in the loop in that case, because she can be an advocate for you and help you set the priority of the reshuffling of the work that has to be done. Because there could be something that came up unexpectedly that's more important and it needs to get done. And at the very end of it, as the worker, it's my responsibility to give the jobs, or to complete the jobs that are given to me by any of the company's management. However, it is your supervisor's job to help you be successful and the company to be successful in helping you to complete that work. So having open and honest communication is one of the most important things you can do in your job to help you be the most successful. That's what I have found. So open and honest communication, getting back and letting them know what you are capable of doing and what you aren't, and then working with them to make the correct prioritization in your work. And that's what I've been doing for 20 years, because there's always so much work to be done, but not all of it has to be done as soon as possible. So anything you can do to have that conversation, open up avenues of time in order to do the work that you need to be doing is the best thing. Open and honest communication, good working relationship. So you're there.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, communication is key. It really is. Thank you. All right, our next question is for Kayla Rogers. I am a very introverted person. I feel like this is written by me. I am a very introverted person and find it difficult to have conversations about my career with my boss. What can I do to get over this issue? Kayla's the marketing director at Sunoco Institute of Packaging, Design, and Graphics at Clemson University. With a background in communications, Kayla became part of the flexographic industry in 2017 when she moved from Tampa, Florida, where she was brand manager of Zutampa, to Clemson to lead marketing efforts for the Sunoco Institute. Kayla enjoys telling stories that matter, which is what compelled her to join Women of Flexo's marketing committee in its early stages. Kayla, please.
Thanks, Brad. I chose this question. I can totally relate on the introvert to extrovert spectrum. I would definitely lean introvert, I think, with some learned extroverted tendencies. However, I don't know how helpful it is to concentrate on that when looking at this question. I know we all want to be that confident career woman that's portrayed in forward-thinking movies. The character that comes to mind is Meryl Streep in The Devil Wears Prada. I think we all want to have that level of confidence in our careers, but even Streep at the end of the film was not, didn't have it all together. So I think that's kind of what we need to focus on here. A quick Google search tells us that women should ditch perfection, which seems to be the standard we set for ourselves all the time as women, in favor of confidence, which sounds nice, but how do we gain that confidence when we need to have these conversations to advance our careers? So I think we can all agree that the truth is we're not all 100% confident 100% of the time. Even extroverts can struggle to have these types of conversations with their bosses. It may be a bit easier for them, but we all need a strategy when it comes to these situations. So, and sometimes I don't think it's always about being extroverted versus introverted. A lot of times these conversations are easier to have when you've had more years of experience in your field, or when you surround yourself with the right types of people that build you up. Hence why groups like this, Women of Flexo, are really important. We need people to mentor and support and encourage us. So how do we acquire the confidence to have conversations with our superiors about our careers? I have 3 thoughts on this. So finding your tribe, as I already mentioned, groups like this are so great when it comes to those milestones in your career. If you have a mentor in place, which we do have a mentorship committee, and we have a program in place with the Women of Flexo. So would encourage everyone to check that out and join either as a mentor or a mentee. So be a part of something like that. Have your supporters close by. They can be there to advise you and encourage you when the need arises. And then just 2, put things in perspective. It helps to remember that these conversations are tough for most and all types of people, extroverts and introverts, women and men alike. So don't feel like you have to have it all figured out and put together. But I personally like to practice ahead of time when, number 3, that this would be my 3rd point, practice ahead of time before you go in to have these serious milestone conversations with somebody like your superior. I will practice on my husband, my sister, just kind of like flesh out what that conversation might look like having with them. So it could be a friend, a colleague, a parent, but find that person. It could be your mentor in the Women of Flexo group. Find that person and practice having the conversation with them first. So yeah, and then finally, when the appointment arises with your boss to have this career conversation, just remember that they've likely been in this position themselves. So they probably didn't get to where they are today without having these types of conversations with their own superiors and the key decision makers in their lives. So yeah, I think just putting things in perspective and practicing and surrounding yourself with great people. I think all of these things, personally, I think all of these things would help when it comes to having these conversations.
Thanks, Kayla. Yeah, practicing is very underrated, I think.
Yes.
Great to point that out. All right, next couple of questions for Heather Buckles. Hey, Heather, what skills have best helped you advance throughout your career? And how important is networking to finding a new job or position? And Heather is the manager of global communications and global marketing for inks at Sun Chemical. She's been with Sun Chemical for more than 20 years in a variety of positions. Her area of expertise is in marketing, and she is passionate about elevating the experience and thinking outside the box.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate the opportunity to talk today about my experience. I did have to chuckle slightly with Kayla's note about practicing. I'm a big believer in that myself. My husband is always my guinea pig on presentations, getting ready for trade shows, any of that kind of thing. So I found that humorous and glad to know others do it as well. So I guess in response to the first question, what I would say, again, in my opinion, and maybe this surprises everyone, right? But I wish I could go back and really tell my 21-year-old self that the most skills that I'm going to use is going to be the ability to be flexible and adaptable. And it's not to undermine the importance of other skills, right? I mean, depending on your role, if you're a engineer or, in the plan or, vice president of sales, whatever that case is, right? You're going to work and develop that skill set. But in my experience, what I would tell you is that ability to be flexible with situations, people, right? How we adapt to that changing environment. I think a lot of the conversation this morning is, how do you progress in your career, right? Oftentimes you're through a lot of different managers. Maybe, the dynamics in your workplace are changing, your work assignments are changing, right? So it may sound simplistic. I can assure you, at least for me, some days I kind of want to rip the hair out of my head. I'm sure we probably all can relate from that perspective. And I think over the last year across the globe, right, we've all had to adapt and be flexible to new working environments, new ways to interact, right? So being adaptable, being flexible, again, doesn't come without challenges, but what I've come to appreciate, right, is that ability to try to adapt my thinking, be flexible in my approach, right, how I handle that situation. And I kind of take it one step further. And again, maybe it could be somewhat unique to my role in marketing, but, as I'm working with other colleagues or partners or vendors or suppliers, right, I hold them to be kind of accountable, to be flexible, to be adaptable. I mean, I would love to sit here and say that, all of my activities are a straight line, right? It looks more like an EKG, to be quite honest. So you've got to be flexible and be adaptable to what's happening from that perspective. So that would be, my answer around there. And again, in my experience over the last number of years. Oh, and then the second question was around, so how important is networking and finding a new job? So again, I say this from my perspective, and maybe particularly from a marketing perspective, it may be different for many of you joining us today. But I take networking maybe a little bit different in the sense of, I think it's a critical skill to practice, if you will. So talking about practicing again, but it's internally and externally, right? I think sometimes, again, just my thought, but sometimes we talk about networking and it's all about external, and that's important as well. But what I can tell you is working in a large company, right? That opportunity is important to build my network, my knowledge, right? So I would say don't miss out on the internal networking piece of it as well, right? It's opened up opportunities for me within my company. It's helped me progress certainly over the last 20 years, from that perspective. And then the external piece obviously is equally as important, right? And it's maybe not always about finding a new job or position. I use it a lot, and particularly over the last year, one of the things that I've tried to do is at least once a month, I'm trying to reach out to people externally in my network and set up kind of a virtual coffee, right? To hear what they're doing and what they're up to. So it kind of, fills me with some new knowledge, if you will. And I think it's important, particularly in today's environment, to have that that access to be able to reach out to individuals, right? So that external piece takes time, right? It also takes time internally. It is truly a commitment. So what I have been trying to do, again, in my experience, is to help work this a little bit better, is I make sure I put it in my calendar. So, once a month, I'm trying to say, okay, it's time to set up something. Maybe it's internal, maybe it's external, right? I would tell you that over my 20+ year career, maybe I wasn't always good at that networking, and because it does take time, right? So what I would say again is, right, I'm in marketing, so I kind of liken everything to rolling out a new ad campaign. It takes time to build that awareness and trust and be able to demonstrate your capabilities. So I'm always constantly looking for, both internally, externally, how I can kind of push those boundaries a little bit, right? How to build on that network. And take time. And again, I think that's something I know I get challenged with, right? I'm sure everyone here today does as well, but it's taking the time to do that, because it is a commitment, but it can be so rewarding, again, to be able to hear what other people are working on, get other insight, get other trends. I kind of say it's almost like free research in a way, right? That opportunity. And I think it can open up all kinds of opportunities, conversations, and hopefully, as you move forward. So at least from my perspective, hopefully that is, helpful. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Brad.
Thank you, Heather. Yeah, you really got to make the time, right? It's not the easiest thing, but it is an important thing nonetheless. Thank you. Okay, and now we have a pair of questions for a pair of people. We've got Jean Engelke and Betty Lynn Kraft. First question, what techniques have you used to build some of the most impactful mentoring relationships that have helped in your career development? And then a follow-up, how has a mentoring relationship helped you to navigate the differentiation of industry culture versus workplace culture towards career development? Betty Lynn has more than 33 years of experience in the flexographic industry. She is chairman of the Phoenix Challenge Foundation and president of Craft Printing Systems. As Phoenix Challenge Foundation chair, she's responsible for implementing the foundation's goals and strategies. Its main focus is to work with members of the flexographic industry to encourage students and teachers to pursue an education through the Flexo Education program. And Jean started her career, teaching printing and paper science at Western Michigan University. She's held positions in R&D, engineering, global product marketing, and business development. Her current volunteer positions include the Foundation of FTA's board chair, chair of the FQC Executive Committee, member of the RIT and CPCC graphic programs advisory committees, and president of her Homeowners Association. Jean earned an associate degree in graphic and design technology, a BA in printing management, an MBA, and an MA in industrial engineering management. Betty Lynn and Jean.
Okay, I guess I can start it off. I am going to answer that first question by echoing what we just heard Heather say. For me, it's just two words. You must get involved. You cannot wait for someone to notice you. You have to be out there and participate in your organization and the industry. Within a short period of time, in my experience at a company, I was able to identify the leaders that excelled at mentoring, and I sought them out so that I could get some good input and information from those people. They were both male and female, so it's not a male-female thing. It could be anyone. And I also volunteered for cross-functional teams. I was in R&D and found a mentor in marketing. And that relationship opened up a whole new perspective to that organization. Once I saw the possibilities, that it allowed me to focus on career goals that I did not even know that I had. Building relationships and developing new skills is one of the techniques that I use to further my career. It's the same with industry organizations as well. I volunteered. When I first started attending the FTA forum, I really didn't know anyone, but I didn't wait for someone to come and find me. I went up introduced myself and started some conversations. And so this leads to a networking group that far exceeds what you can get in an organization. It is the entire industry. And with all that diversity, you can develop your career into something that you probably never even imagined.
Well, for me, when I started in the industry, I was very young and I knew nothing about printing except what I had seen at a distance. So I decided that I needed to find some mentors and people that I felt like were enjoying their jobs. So I kind of identified people that were enjoying their jobs, their careers, and that seemed to be passionate about the industry. My early mentors were guiding lights to helping me learn what the process was, and gave me training opportunities by simply asking the questions, like I believe Alyssa was talking about. When you didn't understand something, you just asked, and they were able to navigate me toward the right classes and books. I read a lot of books in the beginning, and I searched out numerous people. I probably had about 12 people that I looked forward to talking to at industry networking opportunities, either through the FFTA or TLMI. Back then we had some smaller FTA events, and we created intimate relationships. I believe in getting involved in the industry and organizations. I think that each person is supposed to make a difference in life in general. So I try to make a difference in the industry and give back as much as I was given. One of the things it says, how can mentoring relationships help you navigate the differentiation of industry culture versus workplace culture? Honestly, I don't see a whole lot of difference between the two. I think that people try to make it different, but it really shouldn't be. I look at life in a different perspective, that each of us have a control of our own destiny, and that our life is about the decisions that we make, and the culture that we're in. We chose those cultures because we chose to come into this industry. And I believe that when we do that, you find yourself in a workplace, and what happens is how you react to that workplace. It's about the decisions that you make and how you mold yourself. And if having a mentor or somebody to bounce those questions or maybe things that you don't know how to handle off is a great help. But it's really, when it boils right down to it, it's really about your decisions and the path that you choose. I have a little bit of different perspective on things. I work with career development a lot, and I work with young people a tremendous amount. And I always tell them to dream a job and then go for it. And in our industry, we're given an opportunity of knowing a process, and there's a culture out there, and every workplace has a little bit of culture, but learn that culture. And then if you want to change that culture, it's up to you and you making that difference. I believe we all have that power within us if we just focus that energy on a positive way. So that's kind of my thing.
And I believe career development within an organization is a little different than in the industry. In one of my positions, the culture of the organization meant that my progression path was my manager's job. And my manager was there a long time, and he was not going to go anywhere. So I knew that I had to broaden my perspective if I wanted to advance my career with purpose, either within my organization or within the industry. So at that point, I needed to seek out a mentor that would be able to facilitate enhancing my skill sets. And since workplace culture seemed to be a roadblock, I looked to the industry for opportunities. And I evaluated my experience and my skills and my knowledge. And at the time, I didn't know Flexo was going to be the answer, but I did know that it was a sustainable and incredible industry to be in. So I realized I couldn't wait for someone to come knocking on my door. So I came knocking on their door, and I let them know the value that I could bring their organization and to their company. And for me, there's only one person who is responsible for my career development, and that's me. So I put my efforts into developing skills and searching out new positions that would keep me challenged and engaged. Back to you, Brad.
Thank you so much, Jean and Betty Lynn. Thank you for those very detailed and great responses. And thank you also to Alyssa, Katie, Kayla, and Heather for your answers as well. We're going to move over to the open Q&A portion now of the webinar. So if you have questions, please start to submit them. In the meantime, here's a little bit of a toss-up question. What if I want to know more about Women of Flexo? Well, there's a lot of ways you can learn more. You can visit womenofflexo.org. You can email representatives from the different parts of the Women of Flexo: marketing, mentoring, recruitment, leadership, and diversity. Or you can follow Women of Flexo on their LinkedIn page. I have a question for both Kayla and Heather. Kayla, you talked a lot about practicing, and Heather, you kind of talked about flexibility. I'll be the first to admit that when I try to practice how I hope or anticipate something's going to go, it can get to a point where I kind of have convinced myself, okay, this is how it's going to go. And God forbid it doesn't go exactly that way. I start to panic a little bit. How do you feel? Is there ever a point where practicing can get to not become a roadblock, but maybe it sets you along a path of expectation that if it doesn't, the thing doesn't go that way, it can kind of lead to any kind of, I don't know. I have my own neuroses, but I'm sure we all have that kind of anxiety where if things don't go according to plan, it can make us feel a little concerned.
I know exactly. Yeah, I'm exactly the same way, Brad. And I also have a background in journalism. So if you're anything like me, like when you're taking your notes, they're very like scripted, detailed notes. And I have to remind myself, like, these need to be bullets. Keep them short, keep them flexible. Don't go in there with like, this is the story, this is how it's going to go. So I'm definitely that way too. So I always have to back myself out of that and just remind myself, like, these need to be, have your bullet points, stay flexible. And just, I have to remind myself that, like, I'm going in there to have a conversation with someone. So I need to listen as much as I'm planning to speak. And the conversation obviously will take turns. So you just need to be ready to address anything that arises in that way and just be flexible, as Heather mentioned in her portion of the webinar today. So I agree. It's a problem.
And I would say sometimes, when you practice, I mean, sometimes, yeah, you can maybe go overboard, if you will. But and I think all of us, maybe depending on, I think some of it might depend on who the audience is, at least in my experience, right? You may behave a different way if you're making a big customer presentation, maybe versus internally, or if you're with senior leaders or whatever the case might be. But one thing that I've done sometimes, and my husband can be very good at this as well, is to really be somewhat that devil's advocate, right? As I'm presenting, and he knows nothing about what I'm talking about, but just sometimes asking those questions and maybe getting me off my talking points can be a good way too, or with other, colleagues inside, or, as I talked about, even that external network. Sometimes I've reached out to say, hey, if I talked about these things, what might come to mind, right? So a little bit, to be prepared from that perspective can also be helpful.
Great. Thank you, Kayla, Heather. Thank you. One other question, and then we've got a few rolling in that we'll start to discuss. Question for Jean. Jean, I often get the feeling, I'm obviously an outsider to the industry before I started at FTA, and I've always worried about asking dumb questions. And I'm lucky I have our own Joe Tacito, who I can ask the dumbest of the dumb questions. He never judges me, and he always gives me a straight answer, and he'll tell me it might have been a dumb question, but I have that comfort level and that rapport with him that makes it easy to ask him those kinds of things. What would you say to somebody in my position who might not know that they have somebody like a Joe to ask those kinds of questions to? Should they be worried about opening their mouth and having people think like, well, that wasn't the smartest thing to say, like any kind of those vibes?
Well, absolutely not. One of the things that we know about the Flexo industry is everyone in it wants to communicate what a great industry it is, communicate the technical aspects. We want to improve our performance. We want to recruit people to the industry. And so all you need to do is ask, and almost everyone in the industry would be very willing to talk to you. Like at forum networking, everybody talks to everyone, and the InfoFlex, all the suppliers are willing to talk to you, enlighten you on what the technology is, what they can bring to your organization. And yeah, that's just the way this industry is, that it's so welcoming. And all you need to do is reach out and someone will be there for you.
Thanks, Jean. So we'll move over to some of the other questions rolling in here. Here's a question for any panelist. What is the single greatest decision you've made to propel your career forward?
I can take that one again. Take risks. You don't know what is out there until you look for it. And you don't know that moving from one position to another is going to be perfect, but you've got to take the risk. And you've got to know that taking those risks will propel your career further than if you just sat and waited for someone to notice, oh, hey, I'm here. So take risks.
Jean, I'd like to add on to that too as well. You know, I like to say, don't wait for things to happen, make things happen, right? So if you want to continue to move forward, then ask for more tasks to do, or ask for more areas to get involved in as well too. I think that's very important as well.
I'll second that. I think Jenny's quote at the beginning was great. You really need to get outside of your comfort zone. And that's how you develop yourself, challenge yourself.
I would also recommend never saying no to an opportunity, even though it might not be something you think you'll be good at or enjoy. You just never know until you do it.
Thanks, guys. Betty Lynn, were you going to chime in?
I was waiting for the next question.
Oh, okay. So our next question, I think it's, we have somebody on the panel who can speak very specifically to this, but I think everybody might have something to add as well. How do you juggle new motherhood and career advancement? My field is in sales with travel, and it's male dominated. So I'm trying to figure out how to be successful in my career, but still be a good mother.
So I was going to jump into this one. My job is currently in sales right now. It would require travel if we could travel. I'm a little lucky in the fact that I'm 35 weeks pregnant with my second child. So maybe it's a good thing that we aren't traveling right now, in addition to the fact that my pants don't fit. So I don't have to wear business casual every day. So my first son is 18 months right now, and I'm pregnant with my second to be due in about 4 weeks. And what I have come to find is that it's not as bad and scary as I thought it would be to have to admit what my priorities are. Because when I did it, I realized how many people agreed with me. I realized how many people are parents, even if my peers are male, which they are, and many of us experience that in this industry. If I just said, without, crying wolf, or just being like trying to be honest, hey, I just say what my boundaries are with a priority, like this project is really important to me. So you may see me logging on at an odd time tonight, but right now I have my son home with a fever. So just like communicating, I'm still committed to the task or the project. Right now, my priority is my family, and I will get back to my second priority. As long as you're providing like that balance and you're acknowledging that both are important to you, I've found every time I've done that, my peers or my superiors have said, oh, absolutely, thanks for taking care of that. Family is always first. So you can present both priorities at the same time. And then kind of those people that are with you, which happens to be most of them, are like, oh yeah, great job, great choices. Do what you have to do. And with all of us working from home right now, including our male counterparts, it's been really refreshing to actually hear a lot of children in the background of my male counterparts' phone calls as well. And my boss had his, I think she's about 11 months old, had his baby on his knee one day because his wife, was coming and going from an appointment. So I think it is what it is right now. And just honesty is the best policy, but always just saying that both things are a priority.
I totally agree with that. The other thing is too, is that when we get back to the normal world and we're working, I had my son when he was 18 months and had to take him to a couple of meetings and stuff. And I just explained, I couldn't get a babysitter at that time. I needed to get to the meeting and I was going to work it out. And so sometimes I totally agree. Honesty is the best policy, and letting know people where your priorities are. I haven't met a single person in this industry who would begrudge you for being a parent. And most of the time they always have helpful hints along the way. And Brad, you mentioned one of your mentors of Joe DeCito. Joe probably got me through some of the toughest times when I first entered parenthood. So yeah, it's really helpful.
Kind of like Betty Lynn, like if we just have a little bit more faith in the people of our industry, because it's not as rare or as scary as we think it would have been.
Well, one of the things that we find in the flexo industry is that it's family. And our industry is very large, but it's very small at the same time. So people are very open and very close, and they will help you. I haven't met anybody that won't really just come right out and help you some way.
Thanks, Alyssa, and thank you, Betty Lynn.
Speak to that issue as a boss, too, to get the other perspective. I've been a mother too, and even guys have been parents, and they've had to travel when they've had kids, and they know the pressure. We all know the pressure. This is something that's a very important part of all of our lives. And I think there's so much more receptivity to that being a priority, at least for part of your life. And I know as a manager who of my employees are committed and who's doing a great job. I know that every single one of them, whether it's parenting or some other issue, is going to have times during their career when there are other pressures in their lives that need to take priority. So, this is just one of them. And I think you need to, Alyssa's right, communicate, make sure they know what you're going through, and be open, and you'll get through it. We're all people. We all experience this stuff. This is a short period of your life. I know that as a boss that my employees are going to get through it, and we're going to get through it together, and they are stronger individuals because they have other priorities and whole well-rounded lives. So yes, please be open and trusting that you're going to be well received.
Thanks, Laura. Another question for really anyone. Would you recommend women new to the industry who are seeking to advance pay their own way to an industry event like Forum? Many companies don't pay for employees to attend Forum and don't really make it accessible to attend. And then as a follow-up to that, the person asking the question notes that they have the opportunity to attend Forum each year, but earlier in their career, they did not.
I'll take this one. I have done that. I have paid my own way to Forum, and just to be able to be involved in Forum. I think Forum is probably one of the most important industry events that you can go to. And I believe that it really can change the dynamics of your career path. Early on, sometimes you're not given that opportunity, but I can remember early on in my career taking vacation to be able to take and be able to go to Forum. So yes, I think that's very important, but that's my opinion.
I'd like to add on to that too, Brad. I think the other key too is that a lot of times maybe your boss might not realize how important it can be to you and your company. So if you could talk them into letting you go the first time, or if you pay your own way to go, bring back a report on how it went, what the sessions were about, what you learned from them, the vendors you met. I mean, it's so informative, whether it's the sessions, the networking, or the InfoFlex. There's so much to learn at these conferences as well too. But you know, sending back a report or even information back specifically pertaining to your company and how it could be beneficial to send you again or send other people as well too, I think is critical.
Yeah, I would echo what Jenny said. I went to one company and they had no participation at all in the FTA and Forum. And I was able to convince them that they needed to be involved if they were going to excel in the eyes of their customers. Because if we don't participate in industry events, nobody knows that you're there. And it's a lot harder to convince your customers that you're doing the right thing, you're following standards, and you're technically competent in the industry. So very important.
And another follow-up from another person, but very related. How did you actively go about seeking more engaging opportunities to get involved in the industry or even just volunteering? How do you know where to start or even who to get in contact with?
I can answer this. Well, sometimes you, going to my first Forum, I was very fortunate because one of my vendors took me around and introduced me to everybody. And it was awesome. And the more we learned about, with my company, our majority of what we do here is dry offset printing, but we did start getting into Flexo, and then we bought some companies that did Flexo as well too. So that's why we started attending the Forum. But the more I learned about it, and the more, again, coming from the dry offset world, there's no school to teach you how to do it. There's no school to teach you how to separate, do pre-press work for it. And then I found that in the Flexo world there is. There's schools that teach you how to print, that teach you how to separate. There's even a book called First. That's fantastic. So I was a huge, huge advocate from the beginning. And one of the first sessions that I spoke at, I talked about, it was real life information. You know, it was basically, here's where we were, we followed First, now here's where we are, and here's where we are now, and here's how much money we saved. It was huge. That's exactly the kind of stuff that the FTA looks for. But then the concern happened after that was that then you got asked over and over. Joe sucks you in and you can't get out. But no, it's Joe. All joking aside, it's been very you put yourself out there. If they always ask for abstracts on what you might be able to offer for the sessions moving forward and the different conferences, and then they kind of decide what they want to do from there. But I think just following that aspect of it, or even call Jill directly and say, hey, here's what I got, here's a problem I have, or here's where a solution I came across, or whatever too, and then let's see if they can fit it in or whatever. But there's so many areas to volunteer for and to get involved with, and obviously offering the expertise and the best practices is always beneficial stuff as well too. So
thank you, Jenny. Another question: as one of the only women in my corporate circle and my company, I feel like I'm not taken as seriously as the men. What is a good way to approach this conversation?
Brad, I might add something here. In much of my career, I've often been maybe one of, or part of a few females, right? And I think it depends, right? But one thing I have done is is to really try to find some people that either I had some common interests or goals with, right? Maybe set up kind of a one-on-one meeting with them to get to know them a little bit better. Maybe forge a little bit of an alliance, right? From that perspective, I think that can help. I also think maybe looking for opportunities to maybe present or talk about what you may be working on or how you're contributing, or getting involved in some different projects can sometimes help bridge that, right? At least it's been some of the things that I've looked to do, and it can be successful from that perspective. So it kind of depends maybe on the nature of not being taken seriously. I mean, if it's more, on the egregious side, then that may be a different conversation, right? But those are some of the things I've done.
I can also comment on that. I was one of the only females in a corporation for probably 7.5, 8 years before others started joining us. And what I ended up doing was I found an ally, like Heather said, in the company that I could ask questions about or questions to, and created a relationship. And as I did that, I started to be able to approach other conversations where they could or would take me more seriously, and I could introduce my knowledge as I acquired it. So I think building that relationship internally with someone, an older person usually, gives you that opportunity to have some accreditation to it.
And I would also add that don't be afraid to speak up. Oftentimes, that feeling that I'm the only one or something like that keeps you from speaking up and showing your value. And when you do that, they will start to recognize that you are a value to the team, and you do have the knowledge that that helps move the organization forward. So if you're in a meeting with 8 people and you're the only woman, don't be afraid to speak up, because that's why you're there. They want to hear your opinion.
And when you do speak up, don't use the typical female words, in my opinion, I believe. Just speak the statement without any qualifiers. Men do it all the time, and they sound like they're knowledgeable, but they have no more knowledge than we do.
Time for a few more questions here as we approach 1:30. I'm ready to move up in my career, but I'm struggling with imposter syndrome. What advice does anyone on the panel have on how to overcome that feeling in order to successfully move forward?
I can take that one. Lee Carpenter here. I haven't spoke yet, but I'm on the leadership committee team for Women of Flexo. It's something that I've struggled with a lot. I've always said, I would get an A in school and be like, oh, they just felt bad for me, right? Well, that's not really how that works. You have to know if you have the position, if you have the job, there's a reason. Like everyone said, if it's all men in the room, there's a reason you're there. So just know that your imposter syndrome is only in your head. You have to just push through it, gain some confidence, find someone to support you, find a mentor, and that'll just help. It's something that I struggle with after, 15 years in my career. But know that everyone kind of has that feeling in the back of their mind, but it's not true.
Thanks, Lee. A couple more questions. What does strategic career planning look like?
I can answer that. It was always a running joke with me, and people would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And my response throughout my entire life was CEO. And I approach every position that way, in that I want to learn as much as I can, because when they ask me to be CEO, I'm going to be ready. And so it helps you, again, to develop the skill sets that will move you into various positions or into different organizations, or even a different career path. So that's what I think.
Gene, I would also add to that too, what they mentioned before is meeting with your manager monthly, weekly, whatever's needed to talk about what's your career path and what's a strategic way to get there as well. What's the learning map? What steps do you need to go through to get there? I think that's going to be key. Having that communication, and again, making things happen, not just waiting for things to happen, I think is important.
Mm-hmm. I think you also need to look at what you love to do and what you're good at, and how you can best contribute. If you find an area that you feel as though you're really making a difference in, you should pursue that. But I think all of those things have to come together at the same time. You have to love what you're doing, you have to be good at it, and you have to be making a difference at it. And looking for doors, I always think of them as doors, or opportunities to walk through, is really important. So being out there, talking to people about what you want to do, what your goals are, and having a final, as Jean said, a goal in mind is really important.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Jean. We're at 1:30, but we have one more question. So I'm going to go ahead and ask it, unless, Jenny, would you rather hold it? Up to you.
No, let's go ahead and do it. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Last one. I have a hard time with networking sometimes as an introverted person. To all the other introverted panelists, do you have any tips on how to get better at networking and making connections?
I feel like I've been addressing a lot of the introverted stuff today. So
Yeah, come on, introverts.
So yeah, if you lean more introverted, like these networking events can be very overwhelming. You're probably not comfortable in a large group setting. So personally, what I like to do is, if I'm going to an event like Forum or something like that, when we had them in person, that'll be great to get back together with everyone again. I just try not to feel like I need to approach everyone at the conference. Try to do some one-on-ones, try to make eye contact with some people, and just, build those one-on-one connections as much as you can while you're there. Find the people you find comfortable having conversations with. Maybe if you're manning a booth, you have somebody approach your booth and you feel comfortable having a conversation with them. Start building that network, build that connection as much as you can while you're there. And don't feel like you have to approach everyone. Over time, that network will build. So you don't have to do it all in one sitting. That can be very overwhelming. So that's what I like to do personally when I know I'm going to go to an event and I need to do some networking.
Thanks, Kayla. And I'll just add, if any introverts are out there, you can find me hiding in the corner at the next FTA event if you want to network with another introvert. So that's all the questions. Thank you for all of them. And I'm going to turn it back to Jenny.
Great, thank you guys, and thank you to all the panelists that got on the call today to speak and talk from the heart, and your experience that you've had in the industry as well. If as you leave this lunch and learn, if you have any other questions that you might think about after the fact, you can definitely reach out to us. Go to the womenflexo.org, or there's emails, addresses on here as well too. Feel free to pass along to us. We'll be glad to answer as best as we can as well too. So